This week, on Deadfall Sunday, we'll be taking a look at the protests in Russia over the arrest of Alexei Navalny. I should note that this picture is just a picture of the politician from a 2013 protest, rather than from the more recent ones we'll be talking about today. In doing so, we'll be applying Valerie Solanas' work, SCUM Manifesto, SCUM, of course, standing for the Society for Cutting Up Men. And, in keeping with our theme of fatherhood this week, we will address how the violent response of the Russian state to these protests is emblematic of a wider issue: maleness. On the back of this brief inquiry into maleness, we will conclude with, as Solanus did, the solution to the problem of men: women. Firstly, and briefly, there's been a palpable level of tension in Russia recently because of the arrest of the Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny. The Guardian reports that, quote, police detained more than 500 people at rallies in Siberia and Russia's Far East on Sunday as supporters of Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny took to the streets to protest against his jailing, despite biting cold and the threat of arrest, end quote. Furthermore, quote, police have so far detained an estimated 519 people, the OVD Info protest monitor said. Police have said the protests have not been authorised and will be broken up as they were last weekend. OVD Info said that more than 4,000 people were detained at rallies last week, end quote. The response of the Russian state, by which of course I mean Putin then, has been to utilise the police force to suppress dissent. What this violent suppression of opposition points to is Putin, like all men for Solanus, is experiencing and responding to the rotten core of the ever-fragile maleness. In her analysis of the father, Solanus remarks, quote, emotionally diseased daddy doesn't love his kids. He approves of them, if they're good, that is, if they're nice, respectful, obedient, subservient to his will, quiet and not given to unseemly displays of temper that would be most upsetting to daddy's easily disturbed male nervous system. In other words, if they're passive, end quote. Daddy, aka Putin, wants his children, aka Russian citizens, to be nice and passive, to not object to his rule, to nod nicely and silently to his every whim. Putin's need for passivity is in keeping with the male need to have an iron chokehold around authority. Solanus notes, quote, having no sense of right and wrong, no conscience, which can only stem from having an ability to empathise with others, having no faith in his non-existent self, being unnecessarily competitive and by nature unable to cooperate, the male feels a need for external guidance and control. So he created authorities, priests, experts, bosses, leaders, etc., and government. Wanting the female, mama, to guide him, but unable to accept this fact, he is after all a man. Wanting to play woman, to usurp her function as guider and protector. He sees to it that all authorities are male, end quote. Putin, therefore, is utilising this male-founded authority for two reasons. One, his male lack of emotional capacity renders him unable to respond in any other way than violence. And two, he wants to usurp the maternal role of guider and protector. In short, he's emotionally stunted and wants to be in charge. The male need to be in charge for Solanus stems from their frustration at being unable to be mummy. She argues, quote, the male is eaten up with tension, with frustration at not being female, at not being capable of ever achieving satisfaction or pleasure of any kind. Eaten up with hate, not rational hate that's directed at those who abuse or insult you, but irrational, indiscriminate hate. Hatred at the bottom of his own worthless self. Gratuitous violence, besides proving he is a man, serves as an outlet for his hate, and, in addition, the male being capable only of sexual responses and needing very strong stimuli to stimulate his half-dead self, provides him with a little sexual thrill, end quote. Putin, therefore, feels hatred at his core, which originates from his, like all men's, frustration at not being female. The lack of capacity to do is also something analysed at length by French psychoanalyst Jacques Lacan, who said men's anxiety is linked to the possibility of not being able, end quote. This not being able, then, results in the perpetration of abject violence. Violence, for Solanus, is the way in which men sexually gratify themselves. The impact of this male frustration over their inherent lack explains for Solanus why men become the fathers that they are. Drawing on the Greek myth King Midas, she quips, quote, "The effect of fathers in some has been to corrode the world with maleness. The male has a negative Midas touch. Everything he touches turns to shit." End quote. Masculinity, then, is an inherently vitriolic thing. Circling back to Putin, he's erred on the violent side of his maleness before in his repressive response to the feminist punk rock band cum activist group Pussy Riot. In fact, Pussy Riot have been a member of these recent protests. Days reports that, quote, last weekend, January 23rd, Pussy Riot member and activist Masha Alexsey was arrested alongside other fellow activists, end quote. Putin and Pussy Riot, therefore, have been trading blows in the same way that men and women do, or should do, for Solanus in SCUM Manifesto. Solanus argues that, quote, just as humans have a prior right to existence over dogs by virtue of being more highly evolved and having a superior consciousness, so women have a prior right to existence over men. The elimination of any male is, therefore, a righteous and good act, an act highly beneficial to women, as well as an act of mercy, end quote. Pussy Riot are, then, doing Putin a favour by trying to bring him down. They are committing an act of mercy, quote unquote. Pussy Riot, in this scenario, stand for all those women in Solanus' SCUM Manifesto who rise up and eliminate all those men who've been part and parcel of the ongoing patriarchal societal oppression. Women are the solution to the stain upon human existence that is men. Pussy Riot, and those other women who align themselves similarly, are the answer to the waste of skin that is Putin. This marks the end of the 17th episode of Deadfield Sundays. We hope you enjoyed it, and if you didn't, you're probably a man of the wrong kind. See you next week.